Okay, so do you just want to give us your name and what your roles and responsibilities are of being a resident mentor?
Okay, so I'm Dean Beaver, and as a resident mentor, I'm responsible for maintaining order in halls of residence, first port of call in case of an emergency for the students living in halls, and generally just making sure that the terms of occupancy, which is the contract that resident students sign to live in halls, making sure that those terms of occupancy are being upheld.
What kind of person do you think you need to be in order to be a resident mentor?
Person-wise, I think you need to be able to... it's difficult to explain. You need to be able to mediate quite well, to deal with students that are living in... First things first, they've moved out of home for the first time ever, and they're living in a communal setting. There's a lot of potential for clashes and issues in regards to all different things that mean that they're disturbing each other. And you need to be able to keep a level head and remain sort of unbiased and mediate between individuals. Need to be fairly open-minded, because obviously we've got such a broad base of students coming from lots of different backgrounds, so we have lots of different behaviours that some people find acceptable, others don't. Okay, so sorry, I just wanted to add that I also have to be able to follow strict rules and regulations, because obviously I need to know how the residents should be behaving and make sure I can maintain that.
We looked up the residential wardens and what their work is like on the Growing Ambitions publication, and what sort of person you have to be. Some of these qualities are to be an excellent communicator with a friendly manner, be patient, gain people's trust, be safety and security conscious, and be able to respond quickly and calmly in an emergency.
Do you need any training?
Training-wise, yeah, we get mediation training. We get trained in how to diffuse conflict situations. Not so much counselling, but some sort of, they call it listening, sort of type training. There's health and safety training we're required to have every year. And the same old fire safety training as well that we get every year. Got to be first aid qualified as well. So there's various different types of training required for the role.
They usually receive basic training from their employers on short courses such as first aid and a listening workshop.
We wanted to know some of the positives and the negatives of being a resident mentor.
Positives and negatives. Okay, positives, having an influence on students' lives outside of their academic studies, which as a lecturer in my day job is what I'm involved in, but then having a sort of involvement in the wider community within the university is quite interesting. Getting to know the students on a different level, other than, a lot of the students still perceive the lecturer-student relationship as like teacher-pupil, which is really, we're all adults, so it's not really like that. But getting to know the students on that level is quite a positive. Negative-wise, I mean, there are some quite serious incidents that I've had to deal with in the past, which have been I mean, not so much for me, but quite emotionally tough for those involved. It's really the real extreme ones. I've had to give emergency first aid to someone that had attempted to commit suicide. There was a serious sexual assault that I was the first person. We received training from the police for that, as well as how to maintain a crime scene and things like that, because obviously I went into a room, the girl had been sexually assaulted, so you've got to know of the process you go through to maintain a crime scene so that you're not destroying any potential evidence. Other negatives. I think the pros outweigh the cons in that respect.
As well as looking at the basic training that they get, they also have to look at the health and safety of living in halls, and the resident mentor has to have fire safety training, and they must all be first aid trained.
Those extreme situations happen very, very rarely.
We know that the students report to you, but who do you then report to?
Okay, so the way it works is the resident mentors are hired from within the student service, or not hired, but they're hired from within the university, but work from within the student services department. So the head of student services is our direct line manager, and then one of the vice chancellors oversees the student services.
How many people do you have in your care?
My care, that's an interesting term. I'm in charge of 4 halls. Obviously, I only live in the one, but I'm in charge of 4 halls, and they have between 13 and 19 students in each hall. So it's not masses. We're talking about between 60 and 70 students.
What's the confidentiality like?
Confidentiality, well, obviously anything that I do, and we do deal with very personal issues, so we have to keep records of everything, but then we have to maintain confidentiality unless we've given express permission from the student to go to the appropriate member of support staff that can help them. But obviously that's all done with express permission of the student. So for example, I may deal with someone that has psychological issues that might need to speak to a counsellor. Obviously, I'm not a trained counsellor, but I'm aware of the services and I can direct them to the services and help them take them to them even. But I need to be able to share that information, so I've got to just get permission to do so. But otherwise, unless I'm told otherwise, whatever a student talks to me about in my role as a resident mentor is explicitly confidential.
Do you have to deal with students with disability, and how does that differ?
Sometimes, and depends on the halls of residence, because some of the halls are not equipped with disabled rooms if they're physically disabled. Some of the halls have adapted disabled rooms. I have lived in one previously that did have a disabled room, and certain things like if there's a fire alarm, although you would go through the halls making sure everyone gets out, you would make a specific effort to go to if you've got disabled, go to the disabled room and make sure that disabled resident is able to get out. We had one student with disability, they weren't even disabled and they were deaf, so they had it sounds quite amusing, a vibrating pillar that with this fire alarm went off, the pillow vibrated, but the batteries kept dying on the pillow, so if the fire alarm went, we'd always make sure that you go and knock on unlock the door and make sure that they were aware there was a fire alarm. But it's not just the physical disabilities, there's psychological impairment as well. Lots of special educational needs students, so you're just making sure that it's behavioural guidance as well with those individuals, making sure they're aware that certain behaviours are acceptable and certain aren't, and they impinge on their fellow residents.
On the St Mary's website, they show the support that is available to the students that have a disability, be this a learning difficulty such as dyslexia or a physical disability like being deaf.
We know that you do with halls of residence and with Aldergrove Park, it's a house. How does it differ with the way that you manage those?
Well, because we're in a residential area, and particularly because we're on the external road on the outside of the uni, we need to make sure that students are aware of the laws as well that are relevant. Noise abatement, for example. You would possibly get away with being a little bit louder within indeed the halls of residence based internally in the halls, but on the houses on the outskirts, obviously we have neighbours in between those houses that aren't student houses. So we need to make sure that they are following the laws. Something as simple as making sure they're parking legally if they've got cars. Also making sure that they are not disturbing the neighbours with like a lot of noise after 11 o'clock, which is like the laws of the land. Between 11 and 7, the noise abatement law, you have to be reasonable with the amount of noise you make. Making sure they're aware of that. Other little things like making sure that they're not doing anything to impinge on the neighbours, because our neighbours our reputation within the community is important to the university. So that is actually quite a large part of the role.
The Noise Act 1996 states that the noise must stay below a certain level between the times of 11 p.m. and 7 a.m.
How does your relationship compare to, as from a lecturer, to the resident mentor role?
It's not that different because of the way I lecture. I tend to not be aloof and try to sort of relate with the students that I'm lecturing, and I do the same. I take that same approach to being a resident mentor. I'll be personable with them. I don't, I treat people as I expect to be treated, and that I carry that over into both roles.
How long are you actually on campus for?
What do you mean?
So, are you during term time and non-term time?
We are all year round. All year round. We're actually only contracted as a resident mentor for the academic term, academic year, which is 9 months. Although we're in our accommodation over the summer period, we don't have any responsibilities.
Is there any difference with working with mature students?
Yes. A lot of difference working with mature students. They're far more demanding. They have a lot more life experience and are aware of what their rights are with regards to what they can expect with its services. They also tend to be obviously, if they're a lot older than the other resident students, they tend to be a little bit more reserved with regards to when they go to bed early and not be disturbed and not have the noise overnight. And when you're in a house with 10, 11 people that are maybe 10 years younger than you, the fact that you might want to go to bed at 10:30, 11, and they want to sit up until 1, 2 in the morning playing computer games, playing music, it can be a cause of tension.
Finally, how does your role differ throughout the year? So from September to May?
Tend to be early on. You tend to be a bit more of a. It sounds quite amusing, but a bit more of a sort of like a parental figure. Get a lot of homesickness in halls of residence, so you get a lot of students that really don't want to be here because they're missing home for the first time, and you end up having to sort of help to get them involved in making sure you're working with the senior residents in halls and the student union to get them involved in stuff. Then once everyone gets into the routine, it tends to settle down, and there are key moments throughout the year when there can be like problematic times. The build up to Christmas, build up to the end of the first semester, any sort of wild behaviour that's going to be rule-breaking behaviour tends to surface then. And then, again, once they've had the Christmas break, coming back, it's almost like they're reintegrating back into the sort of the lecturing timetable, but as the weather gets better, funny enough, as the weather gets better, the behaviour can tend to get a bit worse with regards to the antisocial behaviour, which is high on our list of responsibilities, making sure that no one is behaving in a way that is going to negatively impact on any of their neighbours. So the antisocial, as the weather gets better for some reason, behaviour dips a bit, and we've just got to be on top of that, making sure that there's no behaviour that can be individuals. They translate behaviour differently. Someone might be thinking they're having a bit of a laugh and a bit of fun. Someone else thinks they're being bullied, and I've had to mediate a number of occasions like that where you have one person thinks they're playing a practical joke, another person thinks they're being picked on, and you've just got to make them work together to find a happy medium that will enable them to get on.
Thank you very much.
Loco parentis is when the responsibility of a child transfers from their parents to a teacher. Even though they are at an age of an adult, in the first few weeks, the mentor is still required to take on the role, as he has said in the interview. Antisocial behaviour is another responsibility that the resident warden has, and this corresponds to the Antisocial Behaviour Act 2003.